Hello, I'm Lisa Bien, and welcome to Bouncing Back from Body Image. From the day we were born, we are fed messages that we must look a certain way, fit a certain mold, weigh only so much. Toys, movies, TV shows, and music videos and advertisements all throw impossible people to look at our lives every day. People we will never look like. People we feel our friends and family and otherwise want us to become. Many of the people that we see are special effects made on a computer. But unlike those models, our bodies are real. Today we're going to discuss bouncing back from negative body image. Let's get started. Hello, I'm Lisa Bien, and welcome to Bouncing Back.
God makes a way.
Be honest and communicate.
Your authentic self.
That's so critical. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Bouncing Back. Let's meet our guest. Taylor Wise was a nationally competitive swimmer since she was 6 years old. During her years of competition, she noticed that other athletes were struggling with body issues and eating disorders. Wanting to help her fellow athletes overcome these challenges, Taylor is currently pursuing a master's in psychology here at Temple, with the goal of eventually becoming a psychologist who will study how mental health impacts our physical health. Thank you for joining us today. Let's meet Melissa Harrison, who is a licensed professional counselor with a master's in clinical psychology from Westchester University. After spending the early part of her career treating women with eating disorders, anxiety, depression, and related issues at Renfrew Center, Melissa opened up her own outpatient treatment facility. She also teaches at Temple as an adjunct professor of psychology, including a class of eating disorders. It's a pleasure to have you both with us today.
Thank you.
This is such an important topic to cover. It's just, we could spend probably all day just talking about it, but we won't. We'll get started. You and I met last week and we started talking about this a little bit, and I asked you a question that stuck with me since I met you. I asked her, at what point did she realize she didn't like her body? And tell us that day and take us back to that if you can.
Right, so I was a swimmer and I started at 6 years old doing USA competitive swimming year round. And not long after I started, sometime 6 or at least 7, I noticed that my thighs were bigger than the other swimmers. And like, we're all just kids, but I still recognized that I looked a little bit different. And at 6, I didn't know there was a difference between fat or muscle. I just even then associated bigger with bad, and that stuck with me for a long time as an athlete. And it became even more confusing the older I got, the more serious coaches got with our training, and just all the different messages in society about what a female should look like, and then trying to also be an athlete at the same time. It was very confusing.
That's just shocking to me. 6 years old. I mean, I can remember, though, looking in the mirror, too, as a young person and thinking, oh, I wish my hair wasn't this way or I look that way. That doesn't surprise you at all?
Yeah, I was just going to say, that's not that uncommon in terms of my work and what I hear every day from women who are struggling with diagnosed eating disorders. However, I think throughout our entire society, there's something called social comparison, where we're not so sure of ourselves, so we compare ourselves to our peers and to the media. So we often have like conflicting messages about what is healthy and what you're supposed to look like.
So how do we learn what we're really supposed to look like? You know what I mean?
Sure.
So how do we learn that? We started this conversation earlier and I said, I'm very comfortable with the way that I look, right? But I know that the traditional person on TV should be a size 3 or a size 5, right? So how do we get that acceptance, or do you think we're getting better at it as a society?
So in terms of society, I do think there's more of an awareness. There are different blogs and people speaking out about their own body image struggles, which I think is super important, especially for the everyday person to realize. Following what your doctor says and just letting your body be what it's supposed to be in terms of acceptance.
Well, it's interesting because, so have you learned to, at this point, look and say your thighs are not that big, or do you have people, because clearly you're in great shape, right?
Thank you. It took a very long time, and I had to really dedicate a lot of time to focus on it. And thankfully, I had that sense of dedication. I had those skill sets from athletics, and so I was able to focus on myself and how I felt about myself in that way. But it wasn't until I was about 19 that I really started realizing bigger might not necessarily be bad, and muscular is important, especially as an athlete. I want to be fast, I want to be a really good swimmer, and so I need those muscles. And it took a very long time, but I did finally get to that point where I accepted it a little.
Right, so you're 6 years old, and you're looking at yourself and you're saying, oh my God, my thighs are too big. Then you're 19 and you're saying, okay, I'm doing okay here. And you said it took some work. Tell us about the work that you did. I'd love to share that.
Right, so I think, unfortunately, I think we can be very focused on let's change this, and this about our body. And first of all, it's very hard to do that in a natural, healthy way, to actually change your body. And then even if you do succeed, you might want to change something else. You just move on to something else. And so when I finally realized that I shouldn't be focused on the outward appearance, I should be focused on how I feel inside and let that kind of work itself out, that made a huge difference. But that's hard. And I did go to counselors and I got professional help with it, and it was phenomenal. It changed my life, not just in how I viewed my body, but other things that I didn't even realize could influence my body image. It all just kind of, I looked at my body as the biggest problem, and I really needed to look inside first and figure out some other things. And then once I was better with myself internally, I felt better about my body image. But we just get, I think, too focused on the outward appearance. And
we do, so.
We definitely do.
How do you pretend you had her as somebody that you were treating? And we have all our viewers watching right now, and we're coming into, bathing suit season.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
I don't watch a lot of TV, but when I do watch TV, it's every other commercial is, you don't have the shape you want, use this or try that. And it's crazy. And then if you don't like the way your face looks, you can get Botox and we get
There's
surgery.
a lot of options. Unfortunately, there's a lot of options. So one thing more specifically that Taylor was referring to is the phenomenon of feeling fat, and that most people that I've come across in my personal life and my professional life have felt fat. So one of the things that we talk about in counseling is helping the client understand that you have a lot of baskets, and when someone has an eating disorder or body image issues, they put too many of their eggs in their body image basket. That becomes too defining for how they attain their self-worth. So we sort of teach them to spread out the eggs, get more baskets, be an athlete, be a good friend, cherish the fact that you're funny and that you have a good sense of humor, and try to even out the eggs, because when all your eggs are in one basket, whether that's academics or your body, you tend to be more perfectionistic, and things tend to feel more overwhelming when you have all your eggs in one basket.
So perfectionism is rampant, right? Especially here on campus. And I have read many things that say that perfectionism is just as being giving your body it's not good. I can't think of the word. Negative self-talk.
Negative self-talk.
So we talk about that in society all the time, talking about self-talk. There is two types of self-talk, correct? There's positive self-talk and negative self-talk. How do you take your negative self-talk and turn it into a positive? I mean, how many thoughts a day do we probably all have running through our brains?
Countless.
Countless. Our to-do list, and oh my God, I'm fat. I got to get home and cook dinner. What am I going to cook? Because it better be protein, and you know what I mean? It can be exhausting and overwhelming, right?
Yes.
So what would you give some advice for self-talk?
Well, the first thing that I'd like to point out is you have to be aware of it. If you don't, we have a reel going on all the time. As you said, you can't even count how many thoughts you have as a human.
Do you think that there's people that really aren't even aware of what they're saying to themselves?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
That's interesting, because I'm so aware, so I just assume that everybody is. So people, number one, they're not even aware of what they're saying to themselves. Interesting, okay.
The second thing that I want to point out is one of the biggest fallacies is that people believe that their negative, hypercritical self-talk is a motivator. So if I call myself fat, maybe I'll go to the gym more. If I say I'm stupid, maybe I'll study more. And research shows actually you're tapping into your threat defense system where you're attacking yourself, you're in your fight or flight, and your cortisol, which is your stress hormone, actually jumps up. So then your body shuts down to overcompensate for all the stress hormones that are in your body.
I'm getting stressed right now.
Right? And then you get depressed.
Right.
And then you're just like fueled with all this stress hormone and you don't even want to do anything and you give up.
So that's interesting. So that's probably the reason why it takes us a long time to get to the gym, right? When we're
yes,
sitting
we get
there.
very black or white. I know so many people, they go to the gym every day for 2 weeks and then don't go for 2 months because we're black and white. It's a very overwhelming task when we beat ourselves up.
So how do we stop beating ourselves up, I guess, can you help us?
It's $1 million question.
It's $1 million question, right?
So, I mean, one of the things that I definitely wanted to talk about, I know you and I talked about self-compassion. So self-compassion is truly, you can define it the same way as having compassion for another person. It's having compassion for yourself. And I like to call it the best friend voice. So if my best friend came to me and said, Melissa, can you help me go to the gym more regularly? If she messed up on her goal, I wouldn't call her fat. I wouldn't call her stupid. I wouldn't say those things to my worst enemy. So I say, what would your best friend say? And I would say, that's really horrible that you didn't get your goal. I'm not going to let her be lazy and not do it, but I'm going to help her come up with better strategies and I'm going to be supportive. And I think if we all were our best friend voice, we'd be a lot happier in society.
I love that. I often say, treat yourself like your own best friend. Mm-hmm. So this is a perfect time. We're going to take a short break and we'll return more with Bouncing Back in just a moment.
Hello, I'm TUTV's Melissa Steininger with a question of sustainability. Did you know that pedal power can fuel a cleaner, greener Philadelphia? Bicycling is fast, healthy, affordable, and environmentally friendly. It's also the perfect way to get around town. Here are some bike safety tips. Stop at all stop signs and red lights. Ride with, not against traffic. And remember, no riding on the sidewalk. It's actually illegal in the city if you're over 12 years old. Finally, don't be afraid to use the full lane. It's perfectly legal and it'll make you more visible to motorists. Visit bike.temple.edu for more information. Please join with Temple's Office of Sustainability and TUTV to help make Temple cherry, white, and green.
We welcome you back to our discussion about bouncing back from body image. We are with Melissa Wise and Melissa Harrison. Oh, I screwed that up. Anyway, we're talking about self-compassion and how we can really, so we have self-esteem, self-compassion. You seem to have great self-esteem at this point and self-compassion at the same time, right? You probably have friends, though, that don't have it, correct, at this point?
I do, but I definitely noticed it more in undergraduate college than in graduate school, because I think that's a time when we're trying to figure ourselves out, we're trying to learn a lot of different things about ourselves, and it takes time. And we focus, like I said earlier, too much on like the outward appearance. And once I realized more internally how to love myself from the inside, then yes, I came out with a little bit more self-esteem, not just from the physical appearance side, but just I am successful, I'm doing well in school, I'm a good athlete. I started to recognize those other baskets, basically.
Yeah.
I love that analogy of the other baskets. I've never heard it put that way. You're always hearing about let's love ourselves, let's have great self-esteem, and that's great to think of it as baskets.
And even the idea of just self-talk, I think it's important to say that it's not as simple as just telling yourself you love yourself or whatever it is. It takes a lot of practice and hard work. I'm studying sports psychology now, and I was an athlete, and so I know a lot about talking to yourself to motivate yourself before an athletic event. But it's the same sort of thing in everyday life. You want to be able to give yourself that encouragement, but it's not as simple as just, I can do it, I feel good today. You have to be really aware, first of all, when those negative thoughts come in, and practice correcting them as soon as they come in. And the more you do that, the better you'll be at being a little bit more positive, a little bit more gentle with yourself. But it takes time, it's hard work.
There's actually neurological research that supports what Taylor is saying. So we tend to be on our own autopilot, where if we're experiencing negative self-talk, everything that happens to us just goes down the route of negativity. So as she said, she practiced positive self-talk over and over and over again. You actually burn neural pathways, new neural pathways in the brain
negative.
with the positive.
Oh, with the
So you have to
positive.
practice and practice, just like learning an instrument. It's really tough at first, and then eventually the neurons connect. Eventually you get it. You have that aha moment, and that's the same thing with positive self-talk.
So let's do an example, right?
Sure.
An example of how we could take a negative to a positive, because we all do it, right?
Sure, absolutely.
We're sitting in class and we get a bad grade, and oh my God, it's
Great
the end of the world, right? So it happened to me, was an undergrad, and it happens to everybody, right? You see a B. No, Emily, can you see a C?
Someone is a perfectionist there.
You hear that? So you get a C, right? Now all of a sudden you get a C, and on the way to school, you got a flat tire. Next thing you know, your whole day is terrible. You're dumb. You don't know how to drive. You know, this is what we talk, right?
Yeah. So it's so funny. I use flat tire in my examples with my clients. I say, when I get a flat tire, this was a true story. I thought, oh my gosh, I'm not going to pay for my tire, and then I can't travel to work, and then I'm going to be homeless, and then I'm going to have to live with my parents. So I went having a flat tire all the way to like I'm homeless, right? So we can really jump very quickly. And with the practice that Taylor was talking about, you can start to train your mind to say, whoa, 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 I can save up the money. I can maybe ask somebody for help, and it's going to be okay. And that takes a lot of practice.
It takes a lot of practice. And one of the things I think that's interesting is what you said, is that it's hard work, right? And so people don't like to hear that things that we want to work on is hard work. I know myself, I never wanted to hear that a relationship was hard work.
Of course.
But it is,
We want it like that.
So are there other tips that we can give? For example, what I do for myself, I had a real issue with saying no. Everybody you wanted anything from me? Okay, sure. So I took sticky notes and I put no all over.
Love that.
And so are there other tips that we can offer today of good self-esteem, self-compassion? Because I think self-compassion is completely overlooked.
Yeah. As I said before, the best friend voice. But another thing is reminding yourself that we always want to feel different and above average and superior. And I think something that sort of goes against the grain of American culture is being okay with being average and thinking that like I'm imperfect and I'm average, and that's sort of a common part of humanity, is that we're all basically pretty average. Not everybody in this room can be perfect, because that would be impossible. Right. So I'm wondering how you felt about, was there a part in your journey where you had to accept that maybe I'm going to be average in some things?
Yeah, actually, so when I was done swimming, I was very confused, because I thought this athletic identity that I've been so closely, that's just how I viewed myself, is gone. And I thought of myself as less than what I used to be. And it took a lot of recognizing, okay, but I have other things going, and no, I'm not the best at everything, but I'm a well-rounded person. I believe I'm a nice person. I do good things, hopefully. And I just tried to realize, like, okay, I don't have to be the best in one area. I can look at the other areas or the other baskets again. But I love this analogy.
I love that analogy. It's a great analogy.
So being okay with being overall okay and not perfect.
Right, not good necessarily at one thing or defining myself by one thing, but recognizing that there are other things that I can define myself by as well. And another thing that I use to help make myself feel better or just feel a little bit fresher was I really undervalued going outside, or not undervalued, but I forgot about like fresh air and time to myself.
Nature, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
So once I kind of stepped back from the busyness of athletics and school and job and all these things that I was trying to pursue, and just kind of went outside and took time to myself, I had that time to become more aware of what was going on, reflect on some things, and it calmed me down and made me appreciate more about myself.
So you're saying, if I'm hearing correctly, that alone time is pretty important.
Right, it doesn't have to be outside, but that was my tool.
I think we all struggle with that, though, especially with social media in our life. I mean, even when we think we're practicing alone time, our cell phone is here, and we want to know what's on Twitter, who's on Facebook, who's sending you a Snapchat, right? So alone time. So would you agree that there's a certain amount of boundaries that we have to create for ourselves when we're learning how to embrace who we are?
Right, so when we're trying to put in that work to be more positive, to be more compassionate with ourselves, that work, we have to kind of schedule out that time, and that might seem really hard to do when we're very busy, especially on a college campus. There's a lot going on, but if we're going to be serious about feeling good about ourselves, whether it's our body or our mind or our personality, we have to really commit to it, and that means scheduling out time to practice and take care of ourselves.
It's amazing to me that we all struggle with this, right? I'm sure you see people that you would, well, it would blow our mind if we would think that, oh my God, you have low self-esteem, or oh my God, you have this issue.
Sure.
It's mind-blowing to me.
Yeah.
At what point do you think people should be looking for help? At what point, you know, she was smart, she was aware at 6, but you had some...
It took some time.
It took some time, right? And your parents, and it's interesting too, because I said, how about your parents? You know, where were your parents during this whole process? And she said, well, my parents were really supportive. I didn't hear them. So I guess what I'm asking for you is how do we know when, okay, I can't talk positive to myself anymore, I'm done. Like, at what point do we say, I gotta get help?
Right. Well, it's an interesting question because most of us struggle with body image and most of us struggle with negative self-talk. So that can't be, you know, that can't be the defining factor of who needs help. So one of the things that I tell people is to try to measure how much dysfunction and impairment it's causing in your life. So when, for example, the people that I work with have eating disorders, so when they're missing parties and they don't want to go out to dinner with their friends anymore and that's affecting social relationships, or they can't focus on their homework anymore because they're not getting enough calories. So when you see particularly the dieting and the obsession with the body becomes an everyday dysfunction, that is absolutely when you need to go get help. In terms of negative self-talk, when that becomes impairing, you see people develop depression. So I would say the same thing as well about depression. When your mood is influencing how often you want to leave your room. Sometimes people don't want to leave their room. They're in irritable moods all the time. So when those things are causing impairment and dysfunction, you need to go get help as well.
So we talked about self-compassion. We talked about self-talk, positive self-talk. We've talked about self-esteem. Is there anything today that you would really wanted to talk about and thought we have to bring this up? I want everyone to know this about my journey or that about my journey. If there was one thing that you could tell everybody, I mean, I love the whole best friend. You know, that's
the best
great.
friend voice, yeah.
The best friend voice, I love it. But then again, we do sometimes have friends that want to talk to us. They're nice, but
that's true. You're nice, but
maybe they're not your best friend.
The good best friends, yeah.
But is there a mantra which you've created now that you live by? I mean, it's really you're both so impressive sitting here, you know, and you're extremely impressive that you're going back and you're in school today to study and help people, you know, and to me, it amazes me when I'm on the beach in the summer and I see people and they really are struggling with an eating disorder. It's obvious, you know, you can see their bones and they're not happy. There's nothing we can do, right? Unless somebody asks for help, correct?
Sure.
So we have to go and we can't walk up to somebody and say,
they have to be motivated. Yeah. Someone struggling definitely needs to want the help and to be open with it. I think Taylor mentioned that her parents were saying things and she didn't hear them necessarily, so it took probably her own journey to identify when she should get help. But in terms of like maybe an overall message would be balance and flexibility. Balance and flexibility with your meals, balance and flexibility in how much time you spent on appearance. I don't think that my message would be no one care about their appearance and never have any hygiene or like don't wear makeup. Like that's definitely not my message at all.
Take all my makeup off.
But it's to find balance in your personality and in what you spend your time doing, and to not beat yourself up over when you think you make mistakes.
Well, I think that's really important, not beating yourself up when you think you make mistakes, because and it really does impact your entire day, and then it's my friend used to call it awfulizing. He used to say, stop it, you're awfulizing. And I was like, what is that? And he was like, you're taking one bad thing and you're making your whole life terrible. And it's interesting that you used to take a flat tire. I would take something like, oh my God, if I got a client upset, I'd be like, that's it, my kids are gonna be homeless, I'm gonna lose my
go right
children.
to homeless, everybody goes right to homeless.
Everyone goes straight to homeless.
Clinically, we call that catastrophizing. So very similar term. Yeah.
We have a lot of same terms,
we
right?
do. We do. We're on the same page.
Well, this is you know what? I can't thank you enough. Sincerely, this is a great show. Our thanks to Taylor and Melissa for taking the time to join us today. Today is our final thoughts on body image Every year, billions of dollars are spent by advertisers and marketers to tell you how to look, how to dress, how to take care of your body. These messages are absolutely everywhere you go, but your attitude goes with you everywhere too. Learning to love and care for yourself can counter these messages. How you look should ultimately be up to you, and that is a personal matter of expression, not a matter of caving to public pressure. The only judge of your appearance who really matters is yourself, and a good judge and a fair judge. So always remember, give yourself the benefit of the doubt. Once again, I'm Lisa Bien, and I look forward to seeing you next time on Bouncing Back. Hello, I'm Lisa Bien, and welcome to Bouncing Back.
God makes a way. Be honest and communicate.
Your authentic self.
Yeah.
That's so critical.